Let's work a bit with the concept of indifference curve. So let me write over here, indifference curve. Now let's keep our same example with quantity of apples and quantity of bananas. So quantity of apples and quantity of bananas. And let's say that we derive our utility, our benefit, our satisfaction only from these two goods, just to make the point. So our utility is a function of the apples that we consume and the bananas that we consume. Now what is a indifference curve? Indifference curve is literally a curve, but it could also be a line. We'll show some examples where it shows the set. So let me write over here. Indifference curve shows the set of combinations, for a certain utility level. Now let's say we want to have a utility level of 100 units. So if our utility level has to be 100 units, then we can get this 100 units of utility by consuming different amounts of apples. We can consume a lot of apples, so we can consume a lot of apples and much less bananas. We can consume only apples and no bananas. We could go to the other extreme as well. So extremes are possible, but ideally we would like to have some combination. In most cases, if we want to have a sort of balance of consumption, then we would like to have both type of goods. And when we want to have both types of goods, an indifference curve literally looks like a curve. It looks something like that. And let's explain why this is the case. You see, the slope of the indifference curve changes, meaning that the rate at which we are willing to exchange apples for bananas also changes. And let's take 2 points on the graph and prove it. For example, if we take the slope of the indifference curve over here, remember from math, the slope of a curve is the slope that is tangent to it to show the derivative. So if we want to know the rate of change over here, how are we willing to exchange our quantity of bananas versus quantity of apples? We can see that the slope is pretty steep. So what we're saying in this case, what we're saying in the first point over here, that's our first point, to get, what does the slope show? To get one more unit, to get one more banana. So if we want to increase the quantity of bananas by 1 unit, we are willing to exchange quite a lot of apples, because if the slope is steep, it means the slope is going to have, let's say, a value of 2 or 3 maybe, at least in this example. Well, in that case, we're willing to exchange 2 or 3 kilos for 1 kilo of banana. And let's say, just for the sake of the example, that we're willing to exchange 3 kilos of apples for 1 kilo of banana. Does it make sense intuitively? Well, it does, because here, have a look, we're having a lot of apples. Let's say the quantity of apples that we're having in this case is 10 kilos, and the quantity of bananas that we're having here is just 1 kilo. Well, because we would like to have a combination, because we would like to have a balance of both, we are willing to give up more apples for just 1 banana, because we're still going to be at the point of, if we're giving up 3 kilos of apples, we'll be at a point of 7 kilos of apples and 2 kilos of bananas. So whenever we have a lot of one good, we are willing to exchange that good for the other, because we have much of it. We're not really attached to it. We don't value it as much. Just think in simple supply and demand. If supply is high, value is low. Now, what if we go to another point? What if we go somewhere over here? Let's say here. The slope is much flatter. If we draw a tangent line, it would be something like that, meaning that the exchange rate between bananas and apples is much smaller. Let's say if we want 1 more kilos of bananas over here, we're willing to give up very few apples. Let's say maybe we're willing to give up 0.2 kilos of apples, so just 200 grams of apples. Does this make sense now? Well, let's give an example. Let's say that we have over here now 10 kilos of bananas and we're left only with 4 kilos of apples. Because we would like to have a combination of both, by the same logic, we're pretty imbalanced now. We're having too many bananas, so to get 1 more unit of bananas, 1 more kilo of bananas, we're not willing to give up a lot of apples because we're not valuing bananas so much as to give up a lot for it. So again, this is just supply and demand. We are having quite a high supply of bananas. The value of bananas is much lower, so we're not willing to exchange much for it. I hope this makes sense. This is what an indifference curve looks like. This is the most common indifference curve for most goods where we would like to have a combination of both goods. I'll leave it like that for now. In the next video, I'll give some examples of specific indifference curves.